My name is Agata Łuczyńska and I am the president of board of the School of Class Foundation. We support teachers to provide kids with a valuable educational experience to all kids. There is a narrative, a very powerful one, that the internet can be a dangerous place. And many times it is. But we also see that we should talk more about the opportunities that the kids can take from using the internet wisely and responsibly. Crucial thing is building a relationship based on trust and respect between parents and kids, between teachers and kids, and among the grown-ups themselves. We really believe that with the right support, teachers can give an exciting educational experience to kids that will really stay with them for life. And this is what we try to do.
Cześć, witajcie.
Dzień dobry.
Hello and welcome.
For those of you who are with us since the morning, it's a great pleasure to see you again after the break. And if you've just joined us, let me remind you that we are starting the second panel of the Aces of Internet for educators, for teachers, and it's also targeted at everyone else who's watching us, including the parents and everyone else who works with children. Krzysiek, you might slow down. Who are we? Justyna, Suchecka, Krzysztof, Horwat. The Aces of the Internet is a program about how to use the internet wisely and safely, to use its potential for learning and development while maintaining some universal principles. These principles are very good both in the real and the virtual world. And these principles are, can you remind me? Being reasonable, being careful, strong, compassionate. And as part of the program, we've got several dozen scenarios of interactive courses and lessons to be used. And this is both for brick and mortar and also for remote learning, including podcasts and a whole cycle for teachers. We wouldn't be here if not for the organizers, School with Class Foundation. Now, in collaboration with Google, this conference was organized with a view that it's always to work together, and that's why we have a number of partners. The Magot Association, Digitalnie I Kreatywni, Irina Żelska, superbelfer.pl, and one of my favorite projects in the pandemic, Zaproś mnie na swoją lekcję, invite me to your lesson. And we have our international partners. As we said at the very beginning of the conference, Agata Łuczyńska, president of Szkoła z Klasą, has said that for quite a few years now we've been cooperating with a number of other European organizations. This is also thanks to support from google.org. And that's why we've got Ad Faber from Romania, Forth from Greece, Jules and Jean from the Czech Republic, Suradnici I Uczeniu from Croatia, and Teach for Slovakia from Slovakia. So this was this difficult task of showing that we are a truly international group, and that's why this part of the conference is being broadcast online. And do let us know where you are tuning in from. Maybe you're not at your desk, maybe you're not at your office, maybe you're listening to us while walking the dog. So, irrespective of where we are, what we strive to do is to make sure that this is an interactive conference. And we'll be checking out your comments so you can chat with us. And if you go to the registration platform, all the necessary information is there. I'll see you on Facebook and our YouTube channel. We have a lot of our foreign viewers. Hello. And feel free to comment in English on YouTube. Like you said, the past 2 years have shown that it's quite possible to participate in conferences or indeed lessons from anywhere. So do tell us, are you in a forest, on the beach in Greece? Or maybe don't say that because it's still winter here in Warsaw, still looking forward to springtime. But maybe you're watching us from the Charles Bridge in Prague. So do surprise us and tell us. And we will try to surprise you with the presentations we've got for today. We have 2 fascinating hours ahead of us, full of a very interesting, novel approach to education. What we are going to hear about is from a number of very interesting speakers, and if you're interested in anything in particular, again, do let us know. Now, in the meantime, you can sign up to the free of charge courses that have been prepared as part of Be Internet Awesome. We have educators for classes 0 to 3, and then for the range from 4 to 8 in primary school, and you can sign up for it now. Thanks to this, you will be able to see how you teach safety and security online while using these universal principles that we mentioned. So feel free to register and do not be late. Now, it's a safe group here. We're talking about different things, but there are these figures that keep appearing behind us. Krzysztof, can you explain who they are? These are the protagonists of Interlandia, which is a game not just for the youngest, and it's full of emotions and challenges also for adults. I have crossed the river of reality in the game, and my score was 280. What about you? Well, I haven't tried yet, but I can't boast of any significant scores, but, you know, practice makes perfect, and I'll let you know later if I've done all right. So you're invited to play, and by all means, your students are invited to play the game, because the game explains how you should behave online when, for example, they get a suspicious email to the mailbox. Well, I should be good at this then. Well, there are some hints that you can get. Well, he doesn't believe in me. I do believe in me. I will learn everything. Well, I'm sure you had good teachers, and teachers are the ones who introduce us into the world of adults. So, for example, they might help you onto the labor market, and the teacher is the person who accompanies the young people in many important decisions and inspires them, for example, when choosing their career path. So, it's important for the teachers to know what competencies, in addition to digital competencies, will be important on the labor market in the future. Yes, Krzysztof is right, I had some very good teachers and I like remembering them, because I do know that as far as the digital world is concerned, it's not always the IT teacher who's the most important teacher. Some of the values that are important, both in the real and the virtual world, have nothing to do, at least at first glance, with technology. Do you also remember your teachers as such? Some of them, surely, back at the time, they wouldn't show us how to use the internet, but they showed us IT. Are we old? Well, I am a bit older than you are, and that was back in the day when the internet wasn't that widely known. Yes, let's not talk about our age. As you have heard, Krzysztof was very good at Interlandia, and if you have played the game, let us know if you've beaten his score. And again, for me to know who I'll be fighting against when I start playing tomorrow. Now, we want to keep track of time very closely, and we want for everything to be in line with what has been planned. You also know the schedule, and you know that in a moment we'll have the first guest with us. The panelist is going to talk about the competences of the future as part of your career-related resources. Now, this sounds very serious, and it is a serious topic, but it's delivered in a very palatable way, and I'm sure you'll be interested. Małgorzata Rosalska, a professor from the Educational Study faculty at Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań, is with us, so we're leaving you in her capable hands. A lot of knowledge for you. Hello, my name is Małgorzata Rosalska, and I'm going to talk about digital competencies as part of your career-related resources. I'm a professional advisor and educator. I work with both young and adult people, and digital competencies is a topic that's important irrespective of what age group we are working with. During this conference, the Internet Awesome, we have different people. We have teachers, we have educators, maybe we have also professional advisors, and I'm sure we have parents as well. So this topic of digital competencies is what I think is a very important topic to build your career resources in the widest meaning of the word. So I would like to encourage you to think about these items. These are some of the topics that are worth considering. First of all, the relationship between competencies and qualifications, especially these days when competencies can be validated and they can be a very important part of your career-related resources. This is particularly important. Now, secondly, there are 4 ways of thinking about competencies, including digital competencies. First of all, where they are as part of your overall career-related resource. Secondly, I'll try to show you how important digital competencies are vis-à-vis other types of competencies, and also what the effect of synergy can be like, and this should be your target in your educational work. And this also refers to anything to do with your career resources, as we call them. So let's start with competencies versus qualifications. Now, I'm aware who the audience are. I understand that you know these terms. But given what the latest developments in professional advisory are, I think it's a good idea just to recap. Competencies are your knowledge and skills. Some people also say it's with social skills. Now, in a broader sense, which is often used by professional career advisors and personal advisors, is sometimes motivation is also added. Now, I know motivation is not the same thing as a competence, but motivation will boost the significance of some competencies. So, what are qualifications? Well, as a professional advisor would tell you, these are validated competencies. In other words, I have evidence and I can prove that I have the competencies. So these are, so to say, competencies that have been certified with a diploma or a certificate. Someone has checked whether I really can do these things. I'm talking about career resources, so there's a very important line between hard and soft competencies, or you can also call them social competencies, in addition to calling them soft. Now, hard competencies are profession-related. This is how competent we are at a particular sector or at a particular job. The soft competencies very often influence how we can use the hard competencies at work. I think that in your professional careers and educational careers, you will have met people who have extremely wide, hard competencies. They're professionals, but if they are not that good at soft competencies, they aren't fully effective, or it's harder for us to work with them. So this is the first division. There are other divisions as well, but this is the basic thing. Now, secondly, we can validate one's competencies, which means that my competencies can be verified, checked by an expert or someone else who has the right to do it, and he or she will confirm that I do have these competencies. Now, this is important because more and more we pay attention to competencies that are learned outside of the formal educational system. In other words, it shouldn't be important where I learned something. What should be important is whether I can do it and whether I can use it. Now, moving on to career-related things, what I would like to put on the table for you is the model of the competence pyramid, which is a very simple, not to say simplistic, model, but it's very useful. And in my work as a career advisor and with my work with students, I've been using it a lot. I think it explains what it's worth investing in as you develop your resources. The foundation of the pyramid is your base level competencies. Now, this could be broken down into further subgroups. And the first would be what is described in the EU documents. When we talk about the base competencies, it's literacy, numeracy, but it also includes the English language and also the digital competencies. Now, digital competencies are part of this base collection of competencies. This is important because, as we all well know, if you don't have these competencies, you are digitally excluded. And it doesn't matter how old you are or what your education level is. If you have a digital deficit, you may be digitally excluded, as a result of which you won't be able to use all the opportunities that are out there. I don't have the time to dwell on this, but I feel you understand what I mean. The second group is the soft or social competencies, such as communication skills, mediation, negotiation, conflict solving, and also operating in conflict, working in international groups or culturally diverse groups. So all of this translates into how we work and how we collaborate with others. The reason this is important is that the professional competencies that I'm going to discuss in a moment are anchored in the base competencies. Very often, when we look at someone's work, we can't evaluate their professionalism because we are not an expert. So very often, the way we perceive someone's work is through how they use the base competencies. And this is an example that I give a lot. To me, it wasn't important if my physics teacher was a Nobel Prize winner, or maybe he just read 2 more pages in the textbook than I did. What I felt was important was how I felt in his or her classes, was the explanation clear, and if I was not afraid to ask for further explanation. Professional competencies are anchored in the base competencies. What this means is that if I don't have a solid foundation, then my professional competencies will also be quite wobbly, or at least there's a risk of them being wobbly. So if we know what the base competencies are, and if we know that they include digital competencies, then we understand that we need to invest in them. It's also called the transferable competencies, which means that no matter what job I have and what sector I'm in, I will be able to use them anyway. So this is the basic investment that's certainly going to be profitable. Now, the problem with digital competencies is that of all the base competencies, they tend to get outdated or obsolete the fastest. And here's where lifelong learning ceases to be just theory and starts to be something we have to use in practice throughout our lives. We gain these professional competencies in formal and informal education at school, at professional courses, at technical schools, and so forth. There is a group of jobs where digital competencies are particularly required. Now, in my experience as part of professional advisory work with students, many students think that digital competences are all about IT classes. And I think this is where advisors and teachers should broaden the awareness of the students of other professions and jobs that require digital competencies. So digital competence should not only be associated with IT. And finally, we have the distinguishing competence. This is something that makes me stand out against other graduates of my university course or other people in my line of work. So this is something I have, but the others don't. And here we can go back to digital competencies. If I have some specialized competencies, now, I'm not personally an expert on this, so I'm not going to give you any examples, but I'm sure you would be able to point to very concrete examples. If someone graduated from an IT technical school as a software developer, he or she will always find a distinguishing competence.
What is important is that the base-level competences are provided by schools, the professional ones by formal education, including technical education, whereas the distinguishing competences is the task for each and every one of us. We are responsible for making us specialists. I am convinced, obviously, you may not necessarily agree with me, but that is what my experience tells me. It is worth encouraging students to take upon themselves the responsibility for their own career. They may not be happy with what the school gives them, perhaps they would like more, but there is an area for individual responsibility. And perhaps the group of digital competences may be the distinguishing level of competences for them. So it is worth considering what could specify the distinguishing competence for them. As you can see, this is a very simple model, but it might be useful in your work as teachers or head teachers. The second line of thinking is something that relates to employability. Sounds strange in Polish, but the employability is a feature of our personal characteristics. People who have never worked, who've never searched for work, have it easy because they were always in demand. But there are also people who keep looking for work and lose work fast because there's something that they lack. And what they lack is often the employability competences. A person with a high level of employability is someone that everyone wants to work with, for whom people want to work with, and with whom people want to collaborate. So I developed a breakup of these employability competences to point to the digital competences in this whole scheme. We can divide these competences into three groups: cognitive, methodical, and social. If you look at the cognitive competences, we have analytical thinking, creative thinking, and foreign languages. It seems to me, but that's just my subjective sense, that we are living in the period of a fashion for creativity. We talk about creativity as a desired feature. But let me draw your attention to the fact that being creative is not enough in professional settings. We sometimes need analytical thinking. In the context of digital competences, both types of thinking can be used and developed. As for foreign languages, I personally encourage students, especially those who are very focused in their interest, not to learn just a foreign language, but also to learn what they are interested in the foreign language, because then they get to know the specificity of a given sector, of a given field which they are passionate about. So these are cognitive competencies. Now, methodology competencies. At the bottom, you have the digital competencies. So this can be broadly understood as digital competencies or digital skills, but also the ability to learn, the ability to take decisions, the ability to manage yourself and focusing on results, as well as problem solving. Why this particular set of features? Well, when we are possessed of competences, we need to use them in a reasonable way, but also we need to develop them in an efficient way. So if I have certain skills and have certain knowledge, the question arises what sort of competencies I have to apply these competencies and the skills in my professional career. So I would like to draw your attention to a certain concern. Often our students have considerable knowledge and considerable skills, but they don't know what to do with that. So they don't have this translation into application. And that's worth drawing attention to. It's not enough to know, you don't have to have the skills. You need also to consider what I can do with that knowledge and those skills. And the third group, which you know very well, so it doesn't need to be developed broadly, social competencies. And when we combine the cognitive, the methodology, and the social competencies, we are given the broad picture of employability. This model of employability competencies can easily be used in two ways. First, from the diagnostic perspective, by assessing what sort of resources we have. We can understand and analyze what is well developed and what needs to be developed further, whether in education or in training. So that's one perspective. The other perspective is looking at the methodological context, where we have the program of developing the career resources, and we can observe to see what are the gaps which need to be filled and how to increase the synergies. If we have considerable resources, we then get considerable better synergies. These resources are best analyzed not just by looking at a checklist whether I have or not have them, but in what sort of relations these competencies are among themselves. Where are the synergies? What I can obtain in the area of distinguishing features. And another perspective that I would like to suggest to you is the professional capital. It's a simple theory created by Hargreaves and Fulham, who suggest the following line of thinking. The professional capital is a certain function of three types of capital: individual capital, social capital, and the decision-making capital. I believe that even when we don't have knowledge, we know intuitively what is the individual capital. That's our private resources, our individual talents, our health, our skills, our passions, our experiences. That's our professional, that's our individual resources. The social capital is whom we know. And by way of a digression, what is still a problem is a bit of a dilemma among students, whether knowing people is okay, and they often respond, well, it depends. But it's also worth stressing the positive aspect of using the persons you know, using your contacts as your career resource. I'm not talking about nepotism, where the use of the social capital is abused and not used in an honest way. But in digital competences, the social capital is important because it determines whom you learn from and what you learn from these people, where you gain experience and where you practice your skills. In the Hargreaves and Fulham theory, the social capital is important in inspiring in the education, because they say there are people who have everything. They have the skills, the talents, they are motivated, they are well supported in the environment, in the community, they're supported by the parents. Everything is okay, seemingly, but they do nothing. They're not active. They don't make decisions. They don't take action. What it boils down to is that the career resources or decision-taking in our careers or the development of our careers, without action, nothing will happen. So it's not about accumulating the resources. It's about taking decisions. It's about using those resources. So when you develop digital competences, we should immediately combine that with the question why we need those skills and what I can use them for. And to refer to the synergy idea, it is worth to create synergies between three capital resources. Then we will obtain professional capital. In conclusion, let me draw your attention to a few aspects which result from what we've been discussing. Digital competences are part of our career resources, but what we do with them will depend on our management skills. And when I have resources, as I already said, they will not necessarily act to my benefit. When I have digital competences, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'll be able to use them to my benefit. So I want to underline the application of competences, which is crucial. I don't just need to develop the competences, I need to use them in different aspects and perspectives. I need to be aware what to do with them. But also I need to know how to develop them. And that relates to another idea, the large L letter, LLL, lifelong learning. We know this concept very well, and we've got used to the fact that we keep learning throughout our lives, but we also have LLG, which is lifelong guidance. The idea of learning throughout your life forces us to also obtain guidance. So every now and then we need to stop, to take a pause and consider what we need. I put it in the second place because this idea seems to be crucial in the context of digital competences, because they tend to get obsolete. I may have quite a lot of them, but they are not useful anymore. So we need information about what we need to learn, but also what we should give up. As a teacher, I am involved in teaching grown-ups, and we have a general idea of how to teach grown-ups, but a more important idea is how to unlearn them things which are dysfunctional, which don't help them, which get in the way. And the digital competences, that is especially crucial. And the third aspect is the changes in the labor market. When we talk about career resources, we should primarily focus on the need to review them every now and then, because when the labor environment changes, when the context changes, when the labor market changes, we should be able to review our competences vis-à-vis what are the needs in the labor market. And why is this important? Well, because sometimes it's worth to consider the prevention of career failure. I don't have time to develop this notion, but it's not just digital exclusion. It's sometimes the problem with having deficits, and these deficits may be small. These gaps may be really tiny, but they may seriously hamper them from realizing the plans. So it is important to update the digital competences. And two questions at the end, also in the context of digital competences. Do we want to be an actor or do we want to be an author of our career in the labor market. An actor is someone who performs the role that was written by somebody else, whereas the author designs his goals and the methods to obtain them. In career projects, in projects related to digital competences, I want to encourage everyone to stop and think about all the sets of competences offered to us by labor market experts. They specify what sort of graduates are needed in the market, what sort of skills and competences. But these are expectations from actors, the actors that will perform certain roles. However, let us remember, and I encourage everyone to do that, the students that we work with don't have to be just actors. They can also be authors. And then they should ask themselves a question, what competences they need. It's not just either or choice. It is a continuum in different life scenarios, in different situations, at different stages. We can be an actor or an author, and that depends on our decision. And the last question, what is it worth to invest in? Obviously, it's trite to say that it's worth investing in digital competences as a cliche, but it's important to invest in what will raise the level of our competences. It's worth investing in the things that will create the synergy effect. And that's how I'd like to conclude. What a pity we cannot discuss these ideas. It would be a very interesting discussion, I'm sure, but I would like to encourage you to think about what I've discussed in the context of the synergy effect. Thank you for your attention.
Była Małgorzata Rosalska. Dziękujemy bardzo.
Thank you, Małgorzata Rosalska. We look very carefully at what you're writing and what you're asking. And by way of a point of order, those who are on the winter break still have time to have classes with the students and obtain the certificates by the 4th of March. You still have time. We hear that you're watching us, that you're listening to us, but you also tell us that your students are very attached to Interland, which is great because it's a game which is worth playing with your students. Krzysztof is worried that there are competitors, but keep playing and keep boasting about your results. We also looked at the greetings. We're happy. We have Poznań, Kielce, Wrocław, Dzierżysław, Łęczyca, and Łękińsko, and Ciechocinek. And there are greetings from afar, I hear. Yes, we've heard greetings from Greece. And you can't go to the Greece beach as yet. It's a bit too cool. So come to Warsaw. It's much colder here. What about competences? We've listened to this presentation with great interest. What about you? What is the distinguishing feature for you? I have a feature that is apparently very rare. Please tell us. Perhaps you have this feature too. Talkativeness? No. I kill with kindness. It is very helpful. Yes, indeed, it's a great, useful, soft competence. But without further ado, let us hand over to our internet aces from partnership countries. On the internet, people can connect and communicate. They can do shopping. They can look for information on different browsers like Google, Safari, Mozilla Firefox, and so on. Thank you. And what for you is an internet ace? An ace of internet is someone that can tell others how to avoid fraud, how to avoid dangerous activities on the internet, false accounts, people who want to promise you money, for instance, or who want to promise you rewards. If you can warn us against that, you're an internet ace. Lana, and what is internet for you, Lana? Internet is a place which connects. You can be in contact with other people. You can obtain various information. And what does it mean to be an internet ace? An internet ace is someone who uses internet carefully. You think about what you do, what information you give to others, because they may be used improperly. On the internet, I am looking for answers. For me, an internet ace is someone who can react, for instance, to violence, to hate speech, to bullying, to fraud attempts. Vicky, what do you think about the internet? Internet helps us get to know one another. We can meet other people. We can learn something together. What does it mean to be an internet ace? What do you think about that? Well, when we are nice, kind to other people, rather than unpleasant, when we help each other. For me, internet is a window to the world. And it is online that I can find answers to almost every question.
I have a feeling that just like us, you wouldn't imagine a conference about children without children. So these statements by the youngest participants will keep coming up in a moment. Just like us, for 2 years, they've been experiencing a very unstable and difficult situation, and it requires new solutions. This partly remote, partly real time can't be approached without adaptation. And you, teachers, know about it the best, because you've been experiencing for the past 2 years particularly strongly. And thank you so much for all the hard work you've done in the pandemic. What do you think about a remote class? Well, what I can immediately hear in my mind is, excuse me, you have muted yourself, we can't hear you. So all the state-of-the-art tools online. I can also see the cats and dogs running in front of your webcams. Incidentally, many students said that they got closer to the teachers because they had a peek into their homes through the webcam. So maybe sometimes it's a good idea to disclose some of these things to your students. Today we are going to be focusing on emotions and the experiences of those young people in their life, the things that we can and that we can't see during online classes. And it's not just about the webcams that someone left turned on. About all this, about how to operate in this environment and how to come into relationships with the students, this is the topic of the presentation by someone who's amazingly good at it, Dariusz Martynowicz, 2021 Teacher of the Year. How do we get students involved and engaged without forgetting that they're also human? It's a pleasure to be here, and it's such a pleasure to be able to share my experience with you. Dariusz Martynowicz, I've been teaching for over 10 years, and in addition to that, I have always had the pleasure of supporting other teachers, and I'm full of energy. I can't just teach alone. So for 10 or 12 years now, I've also been quite intensively involved in supporting teachers in different areas that pertain to creativity, modern technologies, and relations in Polish school. What we are going to talk about today is about how to get students involved in an online class without forgetting that he or she also has their own emotions and experiences. in this day and age, these are very varied, so this is the starting point for my presentation. Let's have a look at what we can see in this slide. These are some random experiences that we can be going through, or our students could be going through them too. In the day and age of the coronavirus pandemic, someone's father may have lost work, and there's double stress for some students. As we know, they don't all have perfect conditions at home to be able to participate in the classes, participate in education without additional stress, and to be able to absorb the content and be active in the teaching process. For example, by getting involved in a conversation with a teacher. A friend of mine told me about a situation that completely changed her attitude to keeping webcams on during the class. She called a student several times, asking him to say something, and he finally turned the mic on, and in the background, swear words of his father could be heard. Apparently, his father was out of work and drank a lot, and that was why the student didn't want to turn on the webcam. The experience of the pandemic is also a family trauma experience, and it's related to a complete change of the social situation. Someone's grandfather may have died, someone's mother may have been forced to close her business. So all of that translates into our relationships with other people and our internal experiences and emotions. Someone might experience fear. Someone else might become even more withdrawn. Someone else yet might be overworked or overburdened. The reason I'm talking about this is that very often during the pandemic we may forget about the things that can't be seen. And what I'm showing to you now is particularly important to me as a teacher, because it gives you a new point of view. We can see the outward things in the teacher's work. That's what other people see in us, but we, the teachers, also only see the outward behavior of the student. And the experience of the pandemic is a very strongly traumatizing experience, not just for the students, but also for the teachers. So what I would like to emphasize is that we need to be aware of the fact that the behavior of our pupils doesn't need to stem from hostility towards us, or from being lazy, or from not caring about education. In fact, the actual reason may be completely different. So the iceberg of the student and the iceberg of the teacher, these pictures were inspired by Joanna Gadomska and Aga Gilska, two teachers that I correspond with as part of Tomasz Tokasz's project. Now, the iceberg shows us what people see. For example, the adults see when looking at a student in ordinary educational situations. So the question would be, how does this picture change in remote learning? What do people think about the teacher's behavior and the things people can't see, which is what we do experience? So the reverse question can also be asked, what can we, the adults, see in a student's behavior, and what do we not know about? And consequently, how do we teach in order to keep acknowledging the human in our students? Very often, people say that the pandemic has triggered many questions about what school should be like. There are some generalizations like education is all about relationships, for example. We also keep saying that the pandemic has uncovered all the things that are wrong about Polish schools. But one thing we seem to be forgetting about as a lesson learned from the pandemic is that this can be and often is a very traumatic experience. Marcin Bera said that a traumatic process has only just started, and it also impacts the educational system and the everyday life of the teachers and students. And he says that with every day this will keep evolving and having a destructive impact on society. So what he says is that it's very important to work out solutions that will make it possible for us to cope with difficult emotions. And the pandemic has opened the taps on all sorts of emotions, and we all experience the pandemic differently, because we all react differently to stress. Importantly, these reactions can be postponed and they can become triggered sometime later, even after the students and the teachers have returned to brick-and-mortar schools. So what can we do about this? Well, I think we should start by talking about what trauma is. It's something that impacts our bodily and psychological integrity, and it's a subjective reaction to an event which is difficult to reconcile with our experience so far. So the reaction of our body and our mental side is not something we would have to talk about too long before realizing that things like post-traumatic stress disorder are by no means rare among both teachers and students. And it's very important in the context of online lessons. When we think about the things that are important in the pyramid of a good online class. A professor of psychiatry, Bogdan de Barbaro, has some very interesting insights into this. Dr. Małgorzata Dragan's team at Psychology Faculty at Warsaw University has published a study that has a number of very important findings. First of all, the pandemic is a traumatic situation. Secondly, for 75% of people, the pandemic continues to be stressful, and for 40% it is not just stressful but indeed traumatic. So the respondents to the survey admitted they felt some elements of PTSD. Now, 70% of the respondents said that the coronavirus has reduced the feeling of having control over their lives, and they no longer feel their life is stable. Now, these numbers, these figures pertain to school too, they pertain to students, and they pertain to teachers. There have been many studies that look into what happens with the students and the teachers. And for example, there was a study on remote learning and adaptation to social conditions in the coronavirus pandemic. This can be downloaded from zdalnenauczanie.org. And findings like these show that nearly half of the students feel much worse, both physically and mentally. And all of this is a starting point for me for what I would like to tell you today. When we think about remote learning, remote teaching, now it's irrespective of whether it's a hybrid mode or whether it's purely remote, we need to consider certain important touch points. First of all, a priority for a teacher has to be teaching. So this is the key process we need to be involved in. Assessment, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily have to be as fully fledged as back at school. In fact, we should revise our attitude to assessment. Formative assessment, for example, is something we should include more and more, especially in remote classes. We don't need to keep assessing our students at all times. We can provide feedback rather than grades. So, if we look at remote learning, I think we should revise the things we assess and what we assess for and how. So we should be thinking about the needs of the students and the emotions that they have. Now, we are torn between what we should be doing online. Should this be the teacher's space? Should it be the student's space? Maybe we should be empowering the students through knowledge and developing their skills. Should we be listening to them? Should they try to ask them to design reality around them? Now, I will try to show that if we are to have a successful online lesson that sees the human in the student, we have to move the stress, the emphasis from the left side of the slide to the right-hand side. So we should give more space to the students, I believe. We should make them not just listen and learn, but also design reality around them. And we should adapt the content to the psychological and mental condition of both the students and ours, because we are very important in the education process as well. Now, webcams. The whole discussion about the webcams and the situation where the teacher is perceived as a police officer who has to have these webcams to verify if the orders are being carried out. I think it's a good idea to start the lesson by saying hello to everyone and using the webcams to wave to each other and to basically show your face. But I'm not a proponent of forcing the students to turn the cameras on to prove something. When we talk about webcams or assessments, it's not about the teacher being a good cop or a bad cop. Now, it's very important to be sensitive to the emotions that the students have, including any trauma. We know that our mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open. If the students are getting inferior results, it could be because of them living in a traumatized world. Even cortisol levels are higher, and as a result of stress, the students might not even be able to hear what we are talking to them because of the contraction of muscles in the middle ear. And this is a real neurobiology. So to me, an online lesson that gets them involved and acknowledges the human in them should be all about the balance between the knowledge and skills on the one hand and emotions and solving the problems that they bring to the lesson with them. I would recommend this article to everyone. This is a very good publication, Education in the Times of Pandemic. The link can be seen at the bottom of the screen. According to this, a priority for remote teaching is the relationship. Irrespective of what we teach, we should be able to find the time for the psychological side of our own education. We should be learning about it, and we should be teaching our students about it to raise our self-awareness. Remote teaching is also a good moment to remember that fun, happiness and experiencing things are very important in education. In this slide, there are different kinds of fun which you can have when teaching and learning. We can show a video, and that's senses-related fun based on the strong experiences. We can focus on social fun when we talk about relationships and emotions. But modern technology also gives us a lot of opportunities as far as fantasy fun or narrative fun is concerned. And this is based on interesting stories and a world that the student creates using different tools, such as Canva, for example, whereby they can create something that is their own experience and that allows them to express themselves. In the remote teaching, it's very important, I believe, to make sure that the students create and design things rather than just listening and receiving messages. They should also be empowered. So we should take care of emotions, and this can be done in different ways. If we want them to be learning, we should care about their emotions, we should be compassionate. Students don't like to learn from someone who isn't fond of them. And what I'm showing to you now is something I've come up with. On the left-hand side, we've got some integration-related activities. The students would receive worksheets in the Canva software, and they were able to edit it. What I do is also about empowering the students. What I mean is that I would like for them to be aware of their own feelings and emotions, be able to define them and talk about them.
It's important to realize in what sphere your emotions are placed. What are you afraid of, for instance? We know that the sense of fear is very, very crucial in the pandemic times, both in teachers and in students. And these exercises, we can achieve quite a lot. What I do sometimes is an emotive week. I distribute these worksheets to students on the basis of which students can determine how they are feeling on a given day. They can name their emotions. Then they can also map out how the emotions change throughout a week or another period of time. So they can see that their emotions were in the green, or perhaps they were not even balanced in their emotions, happiness or positive emotions. So if this comes out, it is worth to investigate what are they doing to take care of their emotions, to remain in the green zone. For me, as teacher, these are crucial, because without taking care of emotions, without noticing the other person with their experiences and feelings, we're not able to really achieve any educational results. So we should develop the awareness of our students. We should think about when they were upset, angry, but it is for them to describe what events triggered what emotions and how they reacted to that emotional state. Education for emotional awareness is something that helps students to express their emotions, but also to get to know themselves better. And for me, that is the basis of online education, because we can do We can do it irrespective of whether we teach physical training or whether we work with small kids or teenagers, whether we teach Polish or other subjects. Let's find time for this psychological education because it is absolutely crucial in this new world where students are so lonely very often. Let us also engage in simple information. What is depression? What is the digital hygiene? What is the well-being? Let us extend the perspective. Let us point them to an article that can be interesting to them. Let's introduce the information, again, irrespective of what we teach. Because even if you teach physical education, sports people also go through crises. So we can talk about that. Often in literature, you have heroes in books which go through depression. So this can also be good grounds for combining our subject with important information about the digital world and the emotional world. And let us not forget about lessons. Let us be creative so that students not just think in the course of the lesson, but also to act. If you recall David Perkins, who mentioned the aha moment, the moment that happens as the peak of creativity. That is the basis for online lessons, because for me, an important value is for students to be able to empower the creativity. And something that can be a recipe for the pandemic alienation is to work together. So I often encourage them to work in groups, even if it's just in groups of 2 or 3 or 4. And I think that is absolutely crucial, because these engaging lessons provide them with the possibility to talk to each other, even if these discussions are about what they're doing right now. I try to avoid worksheets. I prefer students to be empowered to create their reality and do it in various ways. And I want to maintain balance between the time spent in front of the monitor and away from the screen. It's interesting how you can use a simple sheet of paper and a felt tip in the course of the lesson. Guidelines about online teaching tell us that we should mingle activities with on-screen action to things that you can do apart from the screen. And that's what my students do. You can do it in various ideas. This is the poetic deconstruction method. It developed from the idea that students were given sheets of paper from an old book that was not needed anymore and would be thrown out. It can be an old reading material, a historical book, a cooking book, whatever. And they're given these sheets, and the task for them was to only leave the words that would make out a poem and to cross out the other words. So this can be used to characterize, for instance, a literary hero, but also to express their emotions, to write a poem about how they feel and what their feelings are about the future, or a poem about the unpleasant experience in the course of the pandemic. And there's a good exercise away from the screen. We tell them, put the laptop away and just take this sheet of paper, this page from the book, and engage in this exercise. There are other modern technology tools which can be used. This is just a handful of what I try to do in the Polish lessons, whether we use a word art cloud or whether we go towards power chart for a literary hero, or try to play magic, or try to play quizzes and charades, or create a map of thoughts, which they will design in the course of our lessons themselves, irrespective of what method we use. Let's not use it without thinking about the ultimate goal of this tool. And let us choose the tools which combine educational elements. Let us not focus on the tools, so that there are not too many of them, but rather on the needs of the students. I think an answer to the question about how to involve students and how to notice the human being in them boils down to some simple advice. The time of pandemic is the time of being understanding. It's not time for being a cop, a severe policeman. It's the time for going away from stereotypes and being upset that students ignore you, but try and consider why they behave like they do. But first we need to take care of the emotions, of the empathy, and what is also important is for the students, during this screen time, not to be just the receivers of information, but also to be the creators of the reality. When you use different designs, let's consider doing more group work instead of individual work, because it will help create or recreate the bonds between students. And let us not just provide them with information, but let us elicit information from them, broaden the perspective, and provide them with opportunities. Because opportunities is something that should be crucial in times of online education. The most important advice for online methodology cannot be found in a book. It's just the brain and the heart of the teacher. And I strongly believe that you believe that too. Thank you for your attention. I'm glad that I could share my experiences and thoughts with you. But if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can find me on Facebook. I run this group Czas na Progres, and also Progresownia group, which already groups 15,000 Polish teachers, and we try to inspire one another there. You can also find me on Instagram, and I think irrespective of what we think about the pandemic, I believe that the time of the pandemic can also provide you with some positive experiences and turn the negative into a positive. And let us consider what we can introduce into the Polish schools in the times of the pandemic, so that our education creates more self-awareness and self-worth in the students. The time of pandemic is not the time for being a policeman. Thank you, Darek. The work of a teacher is really a challenge and really a great responsibility. The fact that you are taking on this challenge means that you're responsible for guiding your students in the world of the internet. You keep writing to us, and I keep looking at the comments both on the YouTube channel and on Facebook. Our best people are there, and it's wonderful when you mention the first part of our meeting, where together with our students there were interesting panels, and you like them all. Now, there are about 400 participants, which is quite impressive, and new towns are joining us. For instance, Gorzów, Wielkopolski, that's my area, the western parts of Poland. Silesia is also present, and you keep writing about emotions, the things that I jotted down, because, I am still old school about that. Education to emotional awareness. That's what Darek mentioned. Bożena said that the student is a human being as well. And Agnieszka, something sad, it's not always happy things, that teachers are often happy with being these strict cops, asking questions. Darek mentioned that, and you also alluded to that. Darek said, do not become a policeman. But what we often saw throughout the pandemic, when students came back to school and then from school went back to online, the new stage should be begun with emotions, with asking students how they feel. And the prompts which we had from our panelists are very useful. For instance, asking students what films they've seen recently. This is something that helps us create a bond. What is also important and comes through in our previous speakers' statements, it doesn't have to be a critical comment from us, but a comment that will let them feel that you're interested in them and in their feelings. And it's no time to waste. The sooner you begin, the earlier you create that bond, the better for them. I think you know what is coming next. Yes, we have another surprise for you. Please listen to what the youngest internet users have told us. What are you doing? I'm playing Interland. Is it a nice game? Yes. Can I ask you something? What is the Internet? Internet is a place where small children should not enter alone. And who is an Internet ace? An Internet ace is someone who serves the web, but does it according to safety principles. Wonderful. You are a real Internet ace. Here's your diploma. When we sit at home, Internet helps us connect with our friends. For me, Internet is a place to play games. Online, I can also find answers to questions, and if I want to go to Greece for holidays, I can switch on a map and see what's interesting there. Elena, what are you drawing? I am drawing the Internet ace. What is the Internet? Internet is something that lets you send films and pictures online. Who is an Internet ace? An Internet ace can go through the whole game. What game? Interland. An Internet ace is someone who helps you and provides you with support, especially when you're bullied online. Krzysiek, wake up. I'm changing the settings for my account because the kids have reminded me that it's worth to be cautious. You've just realized that now? What would you do if you saw the suspect email in your mailbox? What do you do? Well, what I do, I don't read emails, but perhaps that's not really the right method. Do listen to your students who know quite a lot about safety online. I recently ran a panel with students who explained to me how to verify fake news. And I think that could be useful to many journalists, but we'll talk about that later. Talking about fake news and social media, you are very active in social media. Justyna often talks about educational subjects. So what is your recipe? How to avoid fake news and lies? It's difficult, and she's very fast. It's taken me years of practice. On TikTok, when I have to do something, I keep consulting these things with very young students. And to avoid pitfalls on the internet, it's best to talk to others what we found there. So it's not just students that can learn from teachers, but the vice versa too, because the students know these modern platforms very well. Are we beginning to design the school in a new way? Many people would like to design schooling in a new way. How should a new school look like? Well, apart from the fact that we check various things and verify what's true or not, we should do it in a group. When I listen to Darek and when we're discussing these things now, when I think about the young people who help me, it seems to me that it's the relations that are crucial. The relations and the emotions, what provides us with the opportunity to talk. In a school, you can rarely properly discuss things because the classes are large, there's no time. But it's worth finding the time to talk to the class or even individually to students. I often tell you about how much I learn from young people, but in these school relations, what is crucial is a wise, experienced adult person. And when we compound that by the difficulties of the internet surfing, then it turns out that these relations are really crucial. Both students miss their teachers very often, and teachers miss their students, because the teacher's room is often bustling with activity. Okay, so let's listen to another wise, experienced adult, how to build relations and what things are crucial, what it is worth to learn about your students, but also yourselves. Magdalena Śniegulska, a psychologist, a specialist in education psychology, will tell us about it, and her presentation is entitled, just as we've said, "What if we were to design school from scratch? The importance of relations in teaching and learning." May I welcome everyone. I come to you with a very interesting subject, which stems from a report that has been discussed already, but also from the reality that we often tend to forget about in the busy times that we go through and the task that we have to carry out. A patient came to me one day and she told me about her relations in school and difficulties that she had to go through, rises and falls, ups and downs. And she said, "What if we were to create school from scratch?" I said, "Great question. What would we do? How would we create a new school? What would be different?" She paused. She started thinking and said, "Well, the beginning we have to be very different. I think it would be great," she said, "if the school began with holidays. Holidays where the whole class would go, all the students, all the teachers, to get to know one another, to learn our characteristics, to find out who we want to be with, who we can be friendly with, and then we decide which student wants to learn."
And that would definitely make the task easier. Now, this inspired me, and it made me realize the extent to which students need the teachers in this relationship. We obviously know this in theory, but we don't always use it in practice. Now, according to School with Class report, it's clear that students need these relationships with the teachers, with the tutors, and other friends from the class. So this is the main element of this relationship. It's important to see that there is mutual understanding. Now, understanding doesn't mean we have to agree to everything, that we have to think the same about everything. But the relationship should be a space within which we understand each other's needs and desires. And they also need support. So these are the things I would like to discuss today. As we listen to different presentations and as we participate in conferences and webinars, I suppose you often have the feeling that a lot needs to change. And I would like to begin our meeting today by asking you to listen to me in an active way to see what of these things you are already doing. And as a takeaway from this, you should focus on just one thing, one issue, one technique, one doubt that you want to take home with you. It doesn't make sense to say, tomorrow I'll change everything and I'll do everything differently. That's impossible. So that's why I would encourage you to think about one thing that you feel is important after this meeting. Now, these relationships at school are one thing, but we need relationships everywhere. For example, research shows that psychotherapy efficiency or effectiveness is almost 100% based on the relationship. The better the relationship built by the therapist with the patient, the more effective the therapy. And the same goes for doctors. If we have a good relationship with your GP, if you feel that he or she understands you and supports you, the process in terms of diagnostics and therapy or treatment of the illness will be better. Now, there are different situations where there aren't that many relationships, or we might even think we might make do without them. But study shows the contrary is true. We like using modern technologies without having to deal with relationships, but we do look for the relationships in other spheres of life. And it makes our lives easier. In addition to this feeling that relationships are important at school, we see more and more often that study shows the different factors that impact learning and teaching, and these are non-cognitive factors. So it's all about your memory, the student's concentration, the ability to learn. But in addition to all that, the context is very important. If we look at those non-cognitive factors, they tend to vary from one study to another, but there's a common denominator. Even if we look at, for example, attitude towards learning, being present in class, being willing to do what the teacher says, being involved in the teaching and learning process in the 45 minutes of the class. In all of this, it's pretty clear that the attitude towards learning is better if the student likes the teacher. Being persistent, being unyielding, being ready to postpone gratification, all of this is very much related to my trust to my teacher. If I trust my teacher, if I believe he or she is credible, equitable, someone I can rely on, then my resilience and my perseverance will be stronger. Now, this appears in different contexts, but what can be found in many studies is the emphasis on the feeling of belonging to a community, the community of students, the community of people who are learning things. And the teacher can help develop this community. And in different teaching models, the least they can do is not get in the way and hopefully strengthen it. Other non-cognitive factors include the following: the ability to develop learning strategies, social competencies, and one might wonder whether school is the right place to teach all these things. But I think the answer to this question is affirmative. But in order for that to happen, the teacher has to acknowledge the fact that this is important. And they have to walk the walk, they have to do it in their everyday relationships with the students. Back in the 1970s, a theory was developed which has since gained popularity, and we use it more and more often, because it seems that it's a dream of many teachers and parents to have a situation where the children, the pupils, learn because they want to. They want to expand their knowledge and learn new things. Now, mind you, we don't do everything in life because of our inherent motivation, but we know quite a lot about what facilitates the development of inherent motivation. So it would be great if most children could experience this point in time when they start feeling intrinsic motivation, and that's what makes them learn a subject. So we switch from external to intrinsic motivation. Now, for intrinsic motivation to occur, first of all, the student has to realize that he or she is able to do many different things. Secondly, they have to feel that they have influence on things and that, at least in some areas, he or she is empowered and operates in a certain context. And these three components are developed through the relationship with the teacher. What I know about my student, how I can strengthen them, how I can plan the teaching and development process with them, all of that can translate into intrinsic motivation. The teaching and learning process isn't all about being happy to learn new things. It's sometimes tedious, it requires monotonous, repetitive exercise. And especially when we're starting in a new field of science, very often at the beginning, the students do need support. They need a tutor who will support them. And it's the teacher who can very often help develop an environment in which this tedious, monotonous work will be done. Now, it doesn't have to be a joyful experience, but it will be done, and the student will know why he or she is asked to do it. Now, I was thinking about what we really mean by saying getting to know your student. There are many areas to get to know, and very often at school we focus on the intellectual potential. We want to know what a particular student can achieve intellectually. But it's very important for the teachers to also think about the emotional competencies of a student, about how they can deal with stress, and, for example, the situation when the reward is postponed, and also how they express difficult emotions in particular, but also positive emotions. To what extent the way they express emotions will impact our classes, how the student reacts to being praised, or how they react to difficult feedback. Social competencies are also important in the learning process, and to what extent the students understand the things around them, how they can behave in different social situations, and if they can tell the differences between different situations. Is the behavior different towards the teacher and different towards a peer? And finally, what makes them tick? What makes them happy? What makes them work on a task in spite of difficulties? Or what makes them abandon the task? For the purpose of this meeting, I've listed quite a few questions that are a good thing to ask when we meet a new student. It's a good starting point. And they also make ourselves curious about who we are dealing with, who this student really is, and what he or she is like. And this will be something we can base our work with them on. As you can see, these questions pertain to different fields. Sometimes, for example, it's a good idea to think about the relationships that the student enters, or to think about where they would like to sit in the classroom. Can they plan ahead? Do they participate in planning, if it's possible? What kinds of mistakes they make? Is there anything characteristic about how they approach different tasks? And another important question is about how they react to my expectations. If the expectations are in line with their capabilities, do they react differently than when I expect too much or not enough? And these questions help us see which students, for example, feel helpless as far as some tasks in the classroom are concerned. So getting to know them is very important. As I said, but it can be a long and complex process, and I wouldn't like to frighten you. When building the relationship, what seems to be key, and this comes through in the report very clearly, is the ability of the teacher to listen and to talk to the student. Now, this is different from giving advice. And this is something that students keep telling us. They say that it's easier to build relationships with a teacher who seems to be truly interested in their opinions and also in their everyday life outside of school. In order to be willing to listen, I think it's good to have an attitude where I am ready to accept different behavior on the part of our students. Now, this doesn't mean agreeing with that. It's just an attitude where I understand that in a given situation, a student behaved this or that way. I understand this is what happens. It's different from thinking, what can I do to make the situation different next time? But this very basic level is important, where I say, yes, I understand that this behavior happened. This is related to a difficult skill of being able to recognize what needs are behind the behavior of the students, and acknowledging the fact that maybe the students are unable to satisfy these needs in a different way. I remember a meeting with a teacher who was quite aware of the needs of the students. Well, she told me about a situation in the classroom when she designed an activity and encouraged everybody to participate in this activity. And she said that if you participate in it, you might get an A, and you would definitely not get any grades worse than A. And she was very surprised to see that not everybody decided to participate. And she tried to talk to the students later, and she said, you know, if I threatened you with getting a bad grade if you did not participate, then it turned out the students would definitely participate more. But one thing she seemed to be missing is that the moment the students decided not to participate might not be proof that they ignore the teacher or are unkind. Maybe that was how they fulfilled their need of rest and relaxation, and maybe doing something else than this particular subject, where they might have a great relationship with the teacher, but they also need a break every now and then. Empathy is definitely helpful in developing our relationships, but empathy is not the same as becoming immersed in the student's emotions. Empathy is about understanding that you might be going through this or that emotion in this situation, but I don't participate in these emotions. I don't feel the same emotions immediately. I understand them, and I can provide some support.
When I talk to teachers about building relations, they often say that what they are afraid of is that they would be forced to generating all kinds of advice, providing instruction in difficult situations, situations which overpower them, relating, for instance, to family, difficult issues, relations with other teachers. That is true. Such situations are burdensome and difficult, and sometimes very uncomfortable. And sometimes teachers don't have competences to provide advice in such situations. What is crucial, however, is that many students do not expect an advice from you. They expect to be listened to. They expect that a problem is looked upon, and often the teacher and the school and the class is a safe space where you can discuss your problems. Not necessarily hoping to find solutions, not even expecting solutions, but to voice your concerns, to describe your emotions, and to find out that these emotions are fine and that these are understood by teachers or colleagues. Obviously, there will be situations where this type of relation with a student will force you to provide some sort of support, because it will be needed to the student. And often you feel that this support should be long-term and spectacular. But in very many situations, what is extremely helpful is the kind of attitude which helps the student take a grasp of reality here and now. For instance, if the student feels bad because he has a difficult situation at school, how can I function in class? He says to the teacher. And even to respond to that may be an extremely important element for the student. It seems to me that in the context of building relations with students, it is worth focusing on situations where we may feel that we need to seek professional support. But sometimes it's important to step back, to come back to the first situation where you listen to a student rather than sending him off to the head teacher or the school psychologist. Even just to listen to the student will help the student deal with his issues. Just voicing your problems, your fears, your difficulties may be a relief to them and may help them find the solution on their own. How to build relations in the course of your teacher's work? Well, what is important is focusing on feedback and appreciation, voicing the appreciation to the student, especially when you notice certain positive changes. When you're able to name that positive change and appreciate it, it is very useful. For instance, when there are difficulties in my class, I try to provide as much support as possible to the students. However, when the students start getting success, they get less support, but they get more feedback from me and more appreciation from me of the progress which they're making. In the building of the relation with students, what is also worthwhile is to remember about the empowerment of the student and their autonomy. This experience of autonomy is something that they should experience. And so talking without judging is crucial, especially when you're dealing with teenagers, say between the years of 10 and 14, especially, for whom most contact is by imagining a listening group and the sense that they're constantly being criticized, constantly being scrutinized and observed and sanctioned. So when they have the interest from a teacher without the critical attitude, it is extremely important to them and provides a great support. It seems to me that many teachers become especially acutely interested in students who go through difficulties or have depressed mood. That is obviously important, but at the same time I want to encourage teachers to build the kind of relation where they demonstrate interest, even when the mood is upbeat, when everything is fine. That is also an important experience for the students. The sense that they get attention not just when they're going through difficulty, but also when everything is fine. And I want to encourage teachers to test the kind of method where, when you talk about success, what is working, then you get more certainty that this will be repeated. We unfortunately tend to behave contrary. When I work with parents, I often hear about situations where parents complain about some difficult behavior from their kids. But suddenly, when the kids behaved well, they are stopped dead in their tracks. They don't want to say anything, they just want this moment to continue. But on the contrary, they should voice their appreciation in these moments and name the positive behavior of the kids. Otherwise, this may not repeat again. So it is really worth appreciating even the tiny achievements and small successes, to build on them. And also, it is important to describe what the success is about. This really helps children strive for repeated achievements. What I want to focus on is the need for autonomy. The self-awareness is very fragile in young students. It goes up suddenly, but then drops. very suddenly as well. So when they get information that they are good at something, that they've succeeded in something, will help them raise their self-awareness and will build their autonomy. A teacher can really do a lot. A relation between the student and the teacher is really crucial. When I talk to my patients or clients, but also students, I often hear from them that the experience of being in school and being in a relation with the teacher is the kind of experience where someone changed something important in them and in their lives because of something they said. Obviously, not every teacher can transform the lives of their students. It's not even possible. But if throughout your school career a student meets at least one such teacher who will be able to transform something in them because of what they said or how they supported them, it will be great. And not just for the students, but also for the teacher, because the teacher can then realize that they have an impact, a positive influence on someone's life. Obviously, it is quite a burden and quite a responsibility, the need to develop a relation with students. But it's helpful to have certain assumptions which diminish the tension or the burden which the teacher may feel on his shoulders. Firstly, it is worth looking at students as persons who can do a lot, who can go through very difficult situations and have managed them, and who have considerable strengths and resources at their disposal. Moreover, quite a lot of them have positive experiences in the stories, and most of them would like their lives to develop in a good way. And these elements contribute to the fact that students are often real experts as concerns their lives, if only we ask them good questions and if we can refer or resort to these previous good experiences and treat them as a good foundation for further development. That is why it is important to think about your work as not something that is full of deficits, but full of positives. It is worth testing, analyzing different directions of development, but to specify goals. And this will diminish your frustration and also the frustration of your students. Let us check what the class is doing. Let us see how they check that things work. Obviously, sometimes they do homework, and sometimes they do behave as we would like them to behave. And let's plan in the way where we observe the next step in the development towards the goal that we have in front of us. The methods of developing relations can be very different. We can either simply talk to the students. Obviously, the obvious question arises, how can you find time for talking to them when you have a class of 30? Well, let me share with you the methods that my students and graduates have. You can see examples of building relations in a maths class, for instance. You can start the maths class with a simple question. What is your mood today? Or, what emotions are you feeling now? This is a question of the maths teacher. Not to, turn the class into a psychological session, but to draw attention to the fact that the mood, the sense of our emotions can impact our performance even in a maths class. You can ask them about what they enjoyed yesterday. And in this way, you can anchor the positive mood for the day. You can try and maintain the positive mood as a carryover from the good mood yesterday. Sometimes it's worth asking them about the plans. What would make you happy today? What are the small things that you would enjoy, even if they seem trivial? And asking another trivial question, for instance, what they had for lunch or dinner yesterday. These simple questions create the situation where the relation with the teacher is changing. Suddenly, a certain openness appears, a readiness to develop a relation, to start small talk, but also to move over swiftly to the tasks that the teacher may have prepared for the class. And to conclude, I would like to share with you a letter which one of my patients wrote. I started with a story from my psychology study, and I would like to end with it. An 11-year-old boy had gone through various experiences with his teachers, and we together decided with him to write down the needs that he has and to investigate whether they are feasible, and how important it is for these needs to be voiced and also to focus on the needs which are universal. Whatever student we have in mind, if they met that kind of teacher who met those needs, the functioning as a student would be so much better. And I think that is also part of what we're talking about. And the first need for a teacher is to be kind and to enjoy teaching the class. In the teaching process, very often the student is an object rather than a subject, and it should be the other way around. And that's the basic need that the students feel, to be subjective. They want to be seen as a human being. But also the need to go beyond the teaching objectives and just to enjoy each other's company, to have some fun, to joke around, to get to know one another in this difficult teaching and learning process. Thank you for your attention. What was your experience? I have enjoyed it very much, and I can see that you have enjoyed it also. You kept sharing your experiences and your comments both on YouTube and on Facebook. What I was moved by is that you sometimes admit things which are difficult for us. For instance, to the fact that many students prefer online teaching, even though we talk so much about the difficulty and even the harmfulness of online teaching. But students often like it, especially when the relations and emotions are focused on both offline and online, because the relations in any format are useful. That's what we started with. We talked about the fact that the virtual and real world are the same values, really. And as Magdalena Śniegulska mentioned, the process of teaching can be quite a challenge to students and also to teachers. But it's important to be together, it's important to build the relation, it's important to also have fun, to get to know one another, both the students and the teachers. We're all in it together. Education is relation. That's the slogan I have in my mind, and I think you agree. I have been impressed by this great knowledge that we've listened to, the great values that we've heard, and I hope that you will be able to go back to your classes and you will be able to benefit from what you've listened to today from our speakers. A student is also a human being. Let's remember that. So this sounds like a conclusion. Yes, it is the conclusion. It is time to finish. Małgorzata Rosalska, Dariusz Martynowicz, Magdalena Śniegulska, we want to thank you very much for these wonderful presentations, which have been a great lesson to us all. And to remind you the difficulty of online panels, the benefit is that it never disappears, it stays online. Obviously, we used to make notes, but if someone was making notes and didn't put down everything, you can come back to it because it will stay online. But now we want to conclude so we can go and watch what you have watched, because what's ahead of us is a quiz. Thank you for this event to the School with Class Foundation. If you would like to achieve more information, please join up to the free Be Internet Awesome program. And don't put it off, just fill in the small questionnaire and choose the dates for the training from 1.3 to 4.8 classes. You can join the Be Internet Awesome program just with a few clicks. Don't put it off. Hurry up. Who comes first is first served. Let us remember about the values of the Internet Awesome. Do you remember them? That's my favorite T-shirt. Mindfulness, awareness, empowerment, kindness, and courage. Yes, he doesn't need to put the T-shirt on because he remembers it by heart. And hopefully he also puts it in practice. I will certainly try to do that. We can invite you to another event, intellectual challenges in the Be Internet Awesome quiz. See you soon after a brief break. There will be a match between the kind group and the reasonable group. It will be hosted by Robert Janowski. So time for a coffee, and we'll see you after the break. Let me just remind you that the partners of this event, I knew I'd forget something. These are our partners. Thank you all. So, a quiz is ahead of you, and we have hosted the second panel of Be Internet Awesome. Goodbye.
Czy potrafisz odróżnić prawdę od fałszu? Przekonaj się. Pomoże Ci w tym platforma edukacyjna Demagoga. Zostań mistrzem weryfikacji. Zdobądź umiejętność krytycznego myślenia, a także wiedzę na temat fake newsów i innych rodzajów manipulacji w internecie. Wejdź na stronę platforma.demagog.org.pl i rozpocznij kurs. Dowiedz się, jak wzmacniać kompetencje uczniów w zakresie świadomego korzystania z informacji w sieci. Wzmocnij swoje kompetencje krytycznego myślenia i rozpoznawania fake newsów. Rozwijaj umiejętności cyfrowe, chroń siebie i swoich bliskich przed dezinformacją. Kursy zostały przygotowane przez ekspertów Stowarzyszenia Demagog, pierwszej w Polsce organizacji fact-checkingowej. Już dziś możesz nauczyć się, jak rozpoznawać fałszywe informacje w sieci. Poznaj narzędzia, dzięki którym dotrzesz do prawdy. Po ukończeniu kursu otrzymasz certyfikat potwierdzający zdobyte umiejętności. Podejmij wyzwanie, załóż konto i wzmocnij swoją odporność na dezinformację.